Alright, let's make a Griselda type beat. Alright, at this point I already had what I thought was going to be the main sound picked out, the main loop basically. And I'm just looking for filler sounds, since a lot of Griselda type beats, Benny the Butcher, Conway the Machine, if you listen closely, there's just like a lot of little filler sounds that basically contribute to the main melody. So that's what I'm doing now, just trying to find like what would fit in with this main loop that I have going. Ironically enough though, you're gonna notice later on that one of the things I run into is I'll have a main melody picked out, but like a quarter of the way into the beat, halfway into the beat, I don't like it anymore, and then I'll end up changing the main melody after maybe I have drums just to lay down or something. See, so this is what I was talking about. So now you start to hear little filler sounds here and there. Obviously, you know, we gotta volume adjust them, fit them into the mix right. Part of it is too, it's like when you make enough beats, you're already kind of thinking ahead, so you can kind of hear certain things play out before they're even in place. Yeah, see, so this was like a good example here where like I kind of heard it a certain way in my head, and the way it was time stretched out before, it was too fast. There's really no plan per se. Like, you hear certain things the way you kind of want the beat to sound, but new ideas kind of pop up as you're going through your sound library. Something jumps at you that you weren't planning, and then you're like, okay, let me try this instead. It's partially planned, partial experimentation, and then eventually you land on what will be your beat when it's all put together. Alright, so now I'm looking for the drums. Again, they have like that old school style drum pattern, and yeah, I could make it, but that's the beauty of having a lot of sound kits too. It's, you know, you have some of this stuff already, so it's about efficiency. It's about working smarter. If you have loops already that do exactly what you want, then just use it, you know, go with that. So right here, like I found a drum loop that at the moment I felt like this was gonna work, so this is what I went with. Plus sometimes I don't even know what my final drums are gonna be. Sometimes I just need something in place to kind of get the idea of what it might potentially sound like. That's another thing. Sometimes hi-hat patterns, drum patterns, in the beginning they might just be like a filler sound. You just need that, you know, the swing. You gotta get a feeling for where it might be going and then change it up later. Same thing here again, just filler sounds, just trying to see what jumps out at me. I don't think I had a specific plan at this point. It was just more of the same, like, all right, just something in the background, not really too noticeable, but you know it's missing if it's not there, type of thing. So here we go back to what I was saying before. So at this point, I decided, okay, I didn't like that first melody anymore, but I have drums, so now let's look for something else. And this, with me specifically, this happens a lot. I tend to change my melodies 2, maybe 3 times as I'm making beats. Yes, right now I'm looking for the right pitch, the right tone. It was a little too like happy for me, so I pitched it down. For me personally, I felt like the darker sound on this melody kind of fit better for the type beat that I was trying to make here, which again, if you listen to anything Griselda, it's like a darker, slower type, just like it just feels like raw hip hop. And in case you're wondering, yes, this is my mobile setup, so that's why you see my daughter bouncing in the background. I'm in my living room when I made this. See, so right here, like, I added that little, like, reverse sound, and I'm already putting a reverb on it, because, like, I like to start hearing things with some of the effects that they're eventually gonna have, because I want to see how they fit into the mix now. I don't want to wait to the end to start adding effects. Now I don't always add all the effects, but I like to get a real-time feel for how everything's coming together. Now what I'm gonna do now is, this is how I found my bass lines. I basically isolate my main melody. I record it into Edison because I pitch shifted it. I don't want to grab the original version of it. So now that I have it in Edison, I just need a piece of the loop because obviously it repeats. I put all the effects back. Then I put an empty channel, and you'll see why. So we just do none. We go back to that Edison recording. We do right click, tools, convert to scale, and basically that's your melody line right there. So this is going to be helpful when you go at the bass, which is what I'm going to do now. So now I know exactly where the sample melody, the loop, whatever you want to call it, I know exactly where it's hitting melodically. It's almost impossible for my bass line to be wrong at this point, because I'm only going to use the notes in that key, not necessarily that line, but that key. Again, it's almost impossible to be wrong because Edison is telling you, hey, this is the key of this loop, of this sound. And now at this point, I'm experimenting with which bass I want to use. I started with like an acoustic bass here, but that might change too. And if you see in the MIDI where I'm playing, like I'm playing within the highlighted notes, because again, that's the key of the melodies. And another thing too, simple bass lines, they're not really doing 808 pitch bends or drum rolls or any of that. It's really basic bass lines, and it could be a sub, it could be an acoustic bass, it could be an 808, but really basic hits, because it's just about the feel of the bass. It's not about, it's not trap, it's not any of that. I put our bass on it to Waves plugin just to kind of bring out more of the low end. Specifically, when I say bring out the low end, it's more about feeling the bass rumble more than hearing it, because bass is one of those instruments that you want to. It's an instrument you feel. You don't really hear it like a snare. Like a snare, you hear the snap. So here, just adding drops, and I forgot to take off that first melody that I'm no longer using. But so again, back to what I mentioned like a minute ago or a couple minutes ago, I start to mix everything the way I want to hear it. So I added a little drop in there between the 4 bars, and threw in a quick little snare fill in there, kind of to transition that gap. It's off time, so obviously fix it. Just listen to it. Still a little off time. Again, another transition element, so when it comes off the drop, that crash hit is gonna kind of bring you back to the next 4 bars of the verse. Gotta be careful though when you're doing filler sounds, because you can easily overdo it, which I know I'm guilty of. A lot of times when I'm making beats, I forget, like, you're making beats for someone to rap or sing over, so you can't overfill it. You gotta give them their space for their vocals. Another snare roll, because at this point I'm already thinking like, all right, I'm gonna need a transition from the end of the verse into the hook part later on. So this is why I'm introducing a different snare roll. And as you can see, like, I don't necessarily need the entire snare roll, so I'm only gonna take like a bar of it. It's a little off time, but we'll fix that. Yeah, so don't be afraid to take sounds like this, like a snare roll or something, and just cut out the parts you don't need. Just because there's like a pre-made loop of something, whether it's a melody, a snare roll, a tom roll, you don't have to use the entire thing. Just take the piece you need, time stretch it, and then cut out the rest. Again, we're now back to filler sounds. Just like I did with the snare fill, where I used 2 different ones. I did the same thing with the crash here. So 2 different, they sound different, they're different pitches. One to introduce the verse, one to introduce the break in the middle of the verse. I try not to use the same exact sound between transitions, like between the verse coming into a hook or, a break in the middle of the verse, just so that, it sounds different as the beat goes on. So right here I'm basically building the hook. That's why I separated this section and I added that ride in there. I want something that's just slightly different for the hook. I like how the way the beat sounds, so I'm not gonna sit there and add another melody to this one. But I felt like something different, something that will distinguish the hook section, and I just thought the little ride in there was enough. So there you go. So as you can see, this is my basic structure here. So there's the 16 bar verse and then the hook on the right side. Found this sound that's like a high tremolo string. I kind of felt like, okay, I think this will work good for the hook, kind of to add that final piece of like, all right, when you hear this, you know you're in the hook section, like you can't mistake it. See, and then I turned it down, added a reverb to it, so it became a background sound. I didn't want it to be like up front in your face. Because remember what I said earlier, for the hook, not for the hook, for the whole beat, you gotta leave enough space for the rapper. You know, you don't want the beat to overpower them. And that's basically it. So double it up. There's a second verse hook. One thing I did here, if you notice that little space there when the hook ends, it's just in my head, I heard it like that. I heard it as if the hook ended, there's a quick little 1 bar pause, and then the next verse would start. I shifted it momentarily just to make sure that I was cutting out a bar on the introduction of the next verse, because what I wanted to do was start the second verse without the bass line, have a little drop, and then the bass kicked in. Like I didn't want to start the verse with all the sounds already playing. I kind of want to build them up. And then drops back in. And then for the last 4 bars of the verse, as you can see, I dropped the bass completely because I want that to feel like a build-up for when the hook comes back in and you hear the bass drop back in again. I deleted it just because I added all those drops and then I just wanted to replicate it, so that's basically all that was. Part to it, so 3 verses, 3 hooks, 3 verses. It's subtle, it's nothing major, but it's just enough for like I'm hearing it like almost like if it was a cipher where you're just giving the next person a brief little moment to kind of step up to the mic, you know what I mean? And then right now, move it all back, create an intro. for the intro, a lot of the sounds come out. You usually want just the main melody and then a little build up, and then it'll drop into your verse or your hook, depending on how you structure that beginning. And then I was like, all right, I know how, you know how a lot of beats sometimes just start off just right into it. The drums are in, and it'll be like a 4-bar intro, but the drums are already playing, everything's already playing. So I figured, okay, I'm gonna intro it with like just 1 bar of the drums hitting, and then they drop back out. And that's basically the whole beat right there. 3 verses, 3 hooks, intro. That's it. That's the whole thing. If you want to hear the entire finished version, you can go to 84music1.net, and the beat name is Hostility. Be on the lookout for more videos like this, more tips. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If there's anything you want to see, just let me know.
84.